Thank you very much, Heilani and Hanauma Bay, for letting me come here to talk to you guys. So again, my name is Adam Kurtz. I'm with the Pacific Islands Regional Office of NOAA Fisheries in the Protected Resources Division. And not sure if any of you guys were here for last week's talk with Irene Kelly, but she kind of explained the two sides of NOAA Fisheries. You have the research side, which is more the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center, and then the regional office, which is more the management side. I'm actually on the management side as well with Irene on that side of it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with research, any specific research, but certainly stuff that hopefully you guys can relate to on a more regular basis. So before we get started, just kind of want to talk about some of the things we're going to discuss today. So first off, we talk a little bit about marine wildlife viewing, some of the benefits to it, and also some of the concerns that we can have. And also, why is responsible viewing important? And things that can happen when wild animals aren't viewed responsibly. Some protections for marine wildlife, the different laws and regulations that are put into place to help protect them. And then I'll go over a brief overview of some of the more charismatic species that we have here in Hawaii, and also the specific guidelines that we have to help show you guys the more responsible way to view them. So I don't think I need to tell you guys here that Hawaii is full of beautiful beaches and coastal waters that have an abundance of wildlife. You have a high amount of endemism here, a lot of species diversity, and it really draws in a lot of people from around the world to come here and really enjoy the beautiful landscapes and the critters that we have living here. And over the past few years, we've had record numbers of visitors coming to the island resident population. And with that, besides a lot of traffic on the H1, we get more interactions with the wildlife that at times can be harmful to them. So that, coupled with popularity of social media just exploding in recent years, and puts a lot of pressure on people to post photos and videos of close interactions with wild animals. A lot of people, want to get close to get that once in a lifetime experience and capture that moment and post it on social media. Not only does that affect the animal at the time it's done, but also it can encourage others to do something similar, and sort of starts a chain reaction effect over time. These negative impacts on the animals. So there are some benefits to wildlife viewing. So it's absolutely essential for education and awareness of the species. So these tours that we have on the islands, and even people that live here or tourists that go out on their own, I mean, it's crucial for people to do that, to really experience the animals and learn more about them, and be more aware of their conservation. And, especially people that may not regularly that live in the middle of the country or come from countries that may not traditionally have the same type of awareness that we have. It's really important for them to have these opportunities to experience the animals, about them, and understand why they're so important for our ecosystem. But unfortunately, with a lot of wildlife viewing, if it's done irresponsibly, it can disturb and ultimately harm the marine wildlife. So just want to start out and do a little public service announcement that was made by some of our partners. And it's really kind of interesting one. It really helps you put yourself in the shoes, or I guess flippers, of a monk seal, and how they what they have to put up with on a daily basis. So let's watch that. And I apologize if you guys can't hear the sound, but hopefully the visual, you guys will kind of get the idea of what it is.
If you don't like it, what makes you think they do? And respect our marine wildlife. It's a monk seal! Woo!
So there you kind of get an idea of, the things that happen, and something we may not really realize that, if you were sort of in the place of the monk seal, how would you feel? You're trying to sleep, you're trying to rest, you're trying to survive, and people kind of coming up and trying to get that close picture. And, you got to think to yourself, is that picture really worth it? So talk a little bit about why responsible viewing is important. So kind of how I was saying before, it provides a respectful way to us to really appreciate these animals in their natural habitat, absent of the influence that human beings have. So the experience that you may have at a marine park or an aquarium is a little different. Where you're experiencing them in the wild, you're seeing them with their natural behavior, their wild behavior. And to me, I think that's definitely more of a pleasurable experience being able to see that. But whereas if you interact with them closely, you may not get that similar experience where they're responding to your reactions and, considering, are they really wild at that point? So what responsible viewing does, it provides a respectful way to appreciate these animals. And that's safe for both viewers and animals. So you can see the picture up there. That was actually taken with a gentleman that had an interaction with a monk seal. And the monk seal basically was trying to play with the gentleman. He got a little bit too close. You can see that these are wild animals, and we have to respect the fact that they can be unpredictable if they feel threatened or, protecting their young or something like that. So another thing that responsible viewing is important is that it minimizes disturbance. So disturbance can change wild animals' natural behaviors, and that can actually hurt their chances to survive in the wild. And it can do that by doing things like causing excessive stress, disrupting energy budgets. Energy budgets, especially in ocean animals, is crucial, where any energy that's put forth responding to human activities, energy that's not being put forth doing the behaviors that they need to survive. So it can hinder their essential behaviors, like their resting behavior, nurturing their young, foraging, things like that, and also habituating to human activities. So habituating basically is getting the animals being comfortable around humans. And, why is that a problem for them? Well, our example, first one here is the monk seal. With those used to being around people, wants to play with people, wants to interact with people. And when that happens, monk seals don't play like we play. When they play, they like to bite. They like to hold people underwater. And that can be a safety concern for you and ultimately for the seal as well. Things like humpback whales, when they get habituated to vessels, things like that, they come closer to vessels, they have a higher chance of ship strikes and getting hit by the ships. And for spinner dolphins, they might be habituated to people going out there and swimming with them, playing the leaf game, that kind of thing. So again, it goes back to the energy budgeting where, this is a common occurrence for them. They want to go and play with the people, but while they're playing with the people, they're not getting the rest they need to go out and hunt. They're not getting, the time they need to nurture their young. And lastly, why responsible viewing is important is that harassment of most species here in Hawaii is illegal. It is against the law. That some of these species are protected by state and federal laws. He did not, I don't think. I think it was investigated, and I think he was given a written warning because he didn't really show a lot of intent with the seal. But I'm not entirely sure the history, but I don't believe he actually got a ticket for that. It was more the seal coming up to him. So just going to do a quick civic lesson for you guys and kind of talk about the differences between laws, regulations, and guidelines. So laws are written and passed by Congress, approved by the president, really are the fundamental system. And examples of wildlife conservation laws are the Endangered Species Act, or the ESA, and the Marine Mammal Protection Act, or the MMPA, which will go into a little bit more detail later. So regulations, on the other hand, are actually extensions of laws. So they're not laws themselves. They're more supplemental to laws that are implemented by government agencies like NOAA based on the best information available. So what they're really doing is they're clarifying the law or making it more specific to a certain situation so that it can be better interpreted by the public. So the public can better with the law by understanding it using these regulations. So an example of that is the humpback whale approach regulation, which I'm not sure if many of you heard of. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And also the proposed spinner dolphin approach regulation.
Are you going to talk about the spinner dolphin?
I am, yes. And guidelines, on the other hand, so there's no legal mandate for guidelines. So guidelines aren't legally binding. But what they do, they're just voluntary standards that are also developed by the best information possible to really promote best practice and encourage compliance. So basically, they're put into place so that people understand what behavior, the right behavior to be around these animals, so they can view them safely and also legally. An example that we'll be going through today are our wildlife viewing guidelines that were developed by NOAA Fisheries. So the Endangered Species Act has a prohibition on an act what's called take. So take is to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, collect, or attempt to do these things to an endangered or threatened species. So what's an endangered species? What's a threatened species? What's the difference? So an endangered species is a species that's in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of its range. Whereas a threatened species that is likely to become an endangered species within the foreseeable future. So animals that have this designation as endangered or threatened are protected under this Endangered Species Act. Animals are endangered and which are threatened. There are lists online on the NOAA website and also Fish and Wildlife that kind of list the ones that were endangered. There's a whole process, a rulemaking process they go through where someone proposes it to be listed, and then you have a large report, a status review that takes a look at the animal, tries to determine its range, and then determines whether or not it should be listed as endangered or threatened. So the Marine Mammal Protection Act also prohibits take. So a very similar definition, but a little different. So for the MMPA, is to harass, hunt, capture, collect, kill any marine mammal or attempt to do so. So the MMPA does actually go further to define harassment. So any human act of pursuit, torment, or annoyance that has the potential to injure a marine mammal, which is called level A harassment, or disturb a marine mammal by a disruption of behavioral patterns, which is level B harassment. So if we take a look at the chart here, there are a number of commonly viewed animals in Hawaii that are protected by both the ESA and the MMPA. So if you look at the left side there in the ESA, you have our Hawaiian green sea turtle and our hawksbill sea turtle. And then by the MMPA, it's basically all marine mammals. So humpbacks, spinner dolphins, any of the other dolphins and whales. And then in the middle, there are some species that are protected by both the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act, like the Hawaiian monk seal and the main Hawaiian Islands insular false killer whale. So for those of you that started nodding off when I said civics lesson, going to play another one of these public service announcements. So kind of very similar to the same idea. And it's called If You Don't Like It, What Makes You Think They Do? This one involving turtles.
Wait, isn't that? Yeah? Let's go take a picture. Hurry. If you don't like it, what makes you think they do? Please keep your distance and respect our marine wildlife.
All right, good stuff. Okay, so now that you guys kind of understand some of the protections that a lot of our species have, I'm going to go to a little more detail with specific species and talk about the wildlife viewing guidelines for them, some of the additional regulations that might apply to them, and also a little bit about the threats and their biology as well. First off, we'll start with sea turtles. So here in Hawaii that we normally see, there's two species. There's the Hawaiian green sea turtle, or the honu, and the Hawaiian hawksbill turtle, which is the ea. So the green sea turtle on the left there, it's listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And you'll see them throughout all of Hawaii. In fact, you can see green sea turtles pretty commonly around the world in the tropical, subtropical regions. So they forage throughout all the islands. So they actually nest mostly out in the Hanauma Monument in the French Frigate Shoals area. So about 90% of the nesting's done out there. But there is a good amount of nesting that you'll see in the main Hawaiian Islands, including Oahu particularly up on the North Shore. And as far as foraging goes, they eat mostly seagrasses and algae, occasionally some invertebrates, maybe some small fish as well. The more elusive hawksbill sea turtle is actually listed as endangered under the ESA. And their range in Hawaii is a bit limited. So their population is a lot smaller. It's only a few hundred. They're endangered more because I guess they have the lower population and also the lower nesting rates as well. So if you guys were here last week, you heard quite a bit about the hawksbill sea turtle from my colleague, Irene Kelly. And just an example, annually, we only get about 20 to 25 females that nest for hawksbills compared to the green sea turtles, which get about 500 to 800 females a year that nest. So they forage near the Hamakua coast on Hawai'i Island and then also around West Maui. And then their nesting area is primarily at the Ka'u coast on Hawai'i Island, South Maui, and then eastern Molokai. So they forage typically on sponges, invertebrates, and algae as well. South Maui? Yeah, like Kihei, McKenna, Wailea area. Yep. Yeah, maybe even a little bit more east as well. So there are some easy ways actually to tell the difference between a green sea turtle and a hawksbill sea turtle. A lot of times that's a question people ask, how do you know which is which? Hawksbills are typically smaller, but you can have small greens as well if they're younger. So the main ways to tell are green sea turtles have more of a rounded head, whereas the hawksbills have a narrow head and a pointed beak, which gives them their name, the pointed beak. And I think the easiest way to determine between the two is to look at the scales between the eyes. So the green sea turtles have 2 scales in between their eyes, whereas the hawksbills have 4 smaller ones between there. So if you look at their carapace, their shell, for the green sea turtles, their scutes, or the little panels that are on the shell, are adjoining. So they're kind of lined up more like tiles. Whereas for the hawksbill sea turtles, the scutes are overlapping. So they look more like roof shingles. And a lot of times too, as you see with the hawksbills, they sort of have those serrated edges on the outside. But you can see them with green sea turtles as well. Normally it's a little more pronounced than the hawksbills. So as far as hatchlings go, green hatchlings are dark gray in color, but they also have white trim around their flippers, whereas the hawksbill hatchlings are all brown. So sea turtles do have a number of threats, and hawksbill and greens, the threats are very similar. So one being human disturbance. Another major threat they have is getting entangled in marine debris and also ingesting marine debris. Accidental fishery bycatch. So turtles getting hooked, turtles getting entangled in fishing gear, climate change and sea level rise. So sea level rise hurts their nesting areas. Boat strikes. So we do get a number of turtle strandings that have evidence of getting struck by a boat. And disease is a major one, especially here in Hawaii. We'll see a lot of turtles with tumors on their bodies, the tumors on their neck, under their flippers, on their eyes. And that's a disease called fibropapillomatosis, or FP for short. And that's a disease that's you'll see throughout the world in green sea turtles mostly. But here in Hawaii, it's particularly bad because it tends to focus much on the eyes and on the mouth as well, which makes it hard for them to see, hard for them to eat.
Has that been going down, the tumor?
The FP? So there is some evidence that it is going away, and they're not really sure why. There was actually an FP workshop that I attended a couple of years ago, and it looks like here in Hawaii, what they found is sometimes the disease can get really bad, but after a while on an individual, it can start to get better. So as far as widespread, I'm not really sure what the evidence says if it's getting worse, but we do see turtles that have really nasty tumors. And then a few years later, capture that same tagged turtle and the tumors are much better. So it can get better, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it gets worse and becomes debilitating, can eventually lead to death. It's a good question though. I'm sorry? That is an excellent question and we don't know. There's a lot of theories. They think it could be similar to the herpes virus. It could be, I think for a while they thought it was some sort of nematode or some sort of worm that was causing it. But they've done a numerous amount of tests, and they haven't really been able to isolate the disease to really to track the DNA, to sequence the DNA, to figure out what's really causing it, like what genes are being expressed to cause it. So they are still doing ongoing research and trying to figure it out in a way. But yeah, it's been tricky, been a trick for scientists for many years now. Let's see. So another threat, coastal development. So in the main Hawaiian Islands, especially, that can reduce habitat quality, and that could be, runoff, pollution, things like that as well, or just overall not enough space for them to come out and bask, decrease in water quality, that kind of thing. Nesting impediments, so particularly more so here in the main Hawaiian Islands. Obstructions on the beach may keep females from coming out or going back into the water, might keep hatchlings from being able to go into the water. Bright lights, the turtles tend to be attracted to bright lights. So at night with bright lights, hatchlings might go to the light instead of going down to the ocean where they're supposed to go. And then predators, I think, is, for many animals out there, that's a threat for them. So adults have different predators from hatchlings, adults being sharks. And hatchlings could be any number of things. Those poor guys have a rough go for the first 2 years trying to survive with all the predators they have. And then illegal hunting, which does unfortunately still go on in Hawaii. So talk about the guidelines for sea turtles. So as far as a recommended distance that we ask for sea turtles, we say 10 feet or 3 meters is usually ample space to give a sea turtle to not disturb it. So when you're in the water, you never want to prevent a turtle from surfacing. So they need air to breathe. And a lot of times when people are snorkeling, they're just so entranced by seeing a turtle swimming underneath them. The turtle starts coming up to the surface and they kind of forget to get out of the way. So it's really important to get out of the way, let that turtle come to the surface and get that breath. And I feel like most of you guys are probably from here, so you know better, but turtles like to bask out on the beach. It's very rare, actually, and really only happens here in Hawaii where they come out on the sand. And I know Irene talked a fair bit about it last week. Yes, sir.
How long can they hold their breath?
You know what? That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly. If I were to say, they usually don't hold it for more than a few minutes, but I've heard that when they're sleeping, they can hold it for a couple of hours. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's exactly right, but I know it's a really long time. Irene would know off the bat, I'm sure. So for these basking turtles, they do come up to help thermoregulate and also to rest. So it's important not to push the turtle back into the water or pour water on it. I think a lot of people are worried that the turtle's sick. Maybe it got stranded on the beach. But it is natural behavior for them to come up on the beach here in Hawaii. So you don't want to push them back in. You don't want to pour water on, especially not fresh water. We heard people pouring fresh water on them, trying to clean them off, and they belong to the sea with salt water. So don't do that. And you really don't want to feed sea turtles as well. That was a practice I think that was maybe more common back in the day. But what that does, it habituates them to human activity. And we kind of went over some of the problems that can cause with wild animals. And also they come to rely on this food as well. And, they really need to be able to rely on themselves foraging out in the wild instead of people feeding them. And also some of the things that are fed to them can make them sick as well. And as far as driving boats and other vessels, you really want to drive slowly on near harbors and shallow reef habitats where turtles are known to go. And that's to avoid collisions, ship strikes. And finally, for you fishermen out there, to use turtle-friendly fishing techniques. So this is really important because we do have a lot of fishery interactions with turtles in the main Hawaiian Islands. So using barbless circle hooks instead of the barbs hooks, and using live fish bait instead of chunks of squid or taco that they tend to go after a little more. And finally, it's okay to help. So it's okay for a fisherman, if you do catch a turtle, we understand accidents happen. So we encourage you to bring the turtle in and try and cut the line as close as possible to the hook. So the problem with the fishery interactions isn't as much the hook itself, it's more the entanglement. So if you can get most of the line off, turtles live a long time. They're able to work those hooks out of their body. So we do encourage you to help if you do hook a turtle. Yes, sir.
Is NOAA an enforcement agency, or do you have an enforcement arm to
speak to these illegal or the things that happen?
We do, yeah. So we have an office of law enforcement in the agency, and they're the ones that are primarily responsible for these species for compliance with MMPA and the ESA. We do have a joint agreement with DoCare as well, their DLNR, and also the Coast Guard can enforce these as well, these rules as well.
What beach is that?
You know what? That's a good question. I'm going to assume Laniakea. Just because that's where Malama and Hanu, the group that works with the turtles, are normally out of. And I'm going to assume it's Laniakea. All right. Any more questions on turtles before we move on? No? Okay. You guys got a lot of turtles last week, I know. All right. So now on to the Hawaiian monk seals, the endemic and indigenous Hawaiian monk seal, the Ilioholoi Ka'ua'ua, which is in the rough seas in Hawaii. So the Hawaiian monk seal, like I said before, they're protected under the Endangered Species Act. They're listed as endangered and protected under the MMPA, where they're actually listed as depleted. So we just got a new estimate of the Hawaiian monk seals. It's gone up, which is great news. Talk a little bit about that later. And so now they say there's about 1,400 individuals total. So 1,100 in Papahānaumokuakea Monument and about 300 in the main Hawaiian Islands. And you can kind of see in the graphic here where most of them are concentrated towards the middle of the monument around Laysan, French Frigate Shoals. And as you kind of go away from there on either side, the concentrations tends to decrease a bit. So you see in Hawaii Island, there's actually only a few out there. We'll typically see maybe 5 or 6.
Is that an increase?
Increase, yes. Increase about 100.
Like people keep saying it's 1,200 now.
They have. It was 1,100 for a while, and then recently it's 1,200. And then the most recent trend that they're seeing is 1,400. Yeah, definitely good news. Great news. I mean, 100 animals, a couple hundred animals doesn't sound like a lot, but population's that low. That's a huge deal. So the monk seals, they're considered generalist feeders. So basically they feed on a lot of things. So squid, octopus, crustaceans, eel, various fish. And for more information to figure out what they eat, we're actually able to attach working with National Geographic critter cams to the monk seals and really kind of figure out what they eat. Because there were concerns in the past of monk seals eating a lot of target fish from fishermen and, scaring fish away, depleting the fish stocks that a lot of fishermen were trying to go after. But the critter cam kind of helped debunk that and really saw what the monk seals were eating. And they weren't really eating the fish that the fishermen were going after for the most part. So just like turtles, monk seals do have a number of threats. Depending on where they are, whether they're in the main Hawaiian Islands or in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, they are a little bit different. So over here, human impacts, human disturbance, feeding, intentional injury and killing, which unfortunately still goes on. Fishery interactions is a really big one here. So I'm not sure if you guys see on the news, we had a whole bunch of them actually this year where we had to capture a few monk seals, bring them in, and one of them we had to do surgery on to remove a hook. Others were able to remove without surgery. Entanglements as well, coastal development, reducing habitat quality, and some infectious diseases. So toxoplasmosis is one that's really came to light recently. So it's a disease that is carried by cats and able to get into the water system and unfortunately cause trouble for monk seals and other animals. And then there are a little bit different threats out in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands just because it's more isolated from human activities, but still a lot of marine debris. So entanglements in marine debris and fishing gear, food limitation. So there are a lot of seals that are a bit malnourished, undernourished out there. Shark predation, so the Galapagos sharks I know are a major one. They seem to have a problem over and aggressive males as well. The aggressive males that have been known to either hurt females or trample some of the pups as well. And habitat loss due to the climate change. So similar to the turtles, the rising sea levels, those islands are getting smaller out there and less spot for them to survive.
Well, the food limitation, is that due to overfishing? Because presumably where the seals go has been their natural habitat for probably hundreds of years. So they're disinclined to move on. So is it overfishing or is it?
I think it's more of their foraging patterns. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure because you're not allowed to fish, especially near shore, around the monument. I mean, I guess now up to 200 nautical miles. And the fish that they eat aren't fish that you would see typically pelagically. They're more coastal, more near shore. So I think it could be, just a deterioration of habitat. Could be the fact that they don't go out farther on shore to forage, so they have to stay closer to shore because of predators or things like that. But I think just overall food supply tends to be just decreasing in general. But as far as the exact reason, I'm not really sure. So because they are endangered and you saw the population was very low, there are a number of efforts that we have here for monk seal recovery. So the group over in the Science Center, the Hawaiian Monk Seal Research Program, they study the monk seal biology, ecology, and natural history. And they actually go out every year to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands at field camps. And they'll monitor and assess the populations out there and also here in the main Hawaiian Islands. And there's also the monk seal stranding and response program, which is really a group effort between Boater and the regional office and our partners, and respond to injured, sick, or distressed seals, mostly here in the main Hawaiian Islands, but they also bring malnourished pups from the northwestern Hawaiian Islands each year and bring them to Keikai'ola, which is the Marine Mammal Center that's on Hawaii Island. So they'll bring them when they come back from the cruise ships and rehab them in the center over there, Keikai'ola. And then when they go back out to bring the field campers back out there the following season, they'll bring the monk seals with them and release them back into the wild. Here, we're actually able to do that with 7 animals, which was a record for us. So seven young females. And then here you'll mostly see in the main Hawaiian Islands, we have a lot of volunteer networks for monitoring and outreach for these animals as well. So here in Oahu, we have the Hawaii Marine Mammal Alliance, or HMMA. It's a great volunteer group where they're actually on call every day to go out and respond to monk seals that haul out. And a lot of times they'll put some sort of barrier around the seals, whether it's just a couple signs or something else, to really teach the people, the proper way to behave around the monk seals, teach them about their biology, and also make sure that the seals aren't being harassed. And another helpful thing for them too is there are eyes and ears. So if there is a distressed seal, an injured seal, it's usually one of these volunteers that lets us know. So because the monk seals are endangered and their numbers are so low, they actually have other labels that are attached to them. So a couple of years ago, I believe in 2015, it started, they started the Species in the Spotlight program, which is basically a NOAA-wide program that has 8 endangered species that are most at risk in the near future. And they designated the Hawaiian monk seal as one of those 8 species. So along with the southern resident killer whale, Pacific, the Atlantic salmon, the coho, beluga whale, river winter run Chinook, as well, of California. And another designation that is new this year, they're calling 2017 the year of the monk seal. Actually a 10-year anniversary of the recovery plan for the Hawaiian monk seal. And one, it's a celebration of the new positive population estimate that we got for the species. So it's increased by 3% annually in the last 3 years, which is a great sign. But also it's a campaign of looking forward as well, that there's still a lot of work to do. So it's comprised of a series of recovery actions, research, public events to really increase that awareness and keep this momentum going. So as far as viewing guidelines go for monk seals, this one has actually changed in the recently, where now is to use a rule of thumb. So what you do is actually you'll hold out your thumb in your line of sight with the seal, and then if your thumb completely covers the seal, then you know you're a good distance away. So it's kind of an easy one that people can do. Yep, yeah, just like that. It's an easy one people can do where they're out on the beach. So if you can see the seal poking out with your thumb, you might be a little too close, and it's good to back up. You do have a smaller thumb. That's true. That's true. You got to be careful with that, though. You don't want to get too close. But it's an estimate anyway, so yeah, you can usually tell if you're far enough away. Again, with the turtles, monk seals do like to haul out as well to help thermoregulate and rest. So you don't want to attempt to push them back into the water or pour water on them as well. So let the sleeping seals lie, leave them alone. So you don't want to feed or interact with the seals. So it can disrupt their natural behavior and, can lead to habituation and things like that, things we talked about before. Remember the guy with the cuts on his arm. So we don't want to put other people like that in danger by habituating them. And you want to respect the barriers that are around the seals. So we have our expert volunteers going out there and setting up these barriers to sort of help you show them safe places to stand and also, a place for the seal where you won't disrupt it from resting. So you want to respect that barrier as best you can. And, we try to work hard too to make sure we're not blocking off a lot of the beach. So it's not a legal barrier. You are able to go in there. It's just more of a respectful barrier that we ask people to not go in just because it gives the seal enough space to rest while it's on the beach. And another important one is to keep dogs on the leash when you're on the beach around monk seals. So we do have a number of attacks on monk seals from dogs. And it's not just for the safety of the seal, it's for the safety of the dog as well. So there's a seal up on the North Shore we had this year where it had a pup. And there's a lady walking her dog. Asian dog saw the seal and ran up, just curious. Didn't look like it was going to be malicious or anything. Just ran up to the seal, but a mom with a pup, she's going to protect the pup. She actually took the dog, grabbed it, and threw it up in the air. Her dog as well. By that, these seals are big animals. They have teeth, and especially get between mom and pup. And also, too, there's a lot of disease transmission between seals and dogs. So genetically, they're very similar. So a lot of the diseases that seals have can be passed to dogs as well, and vice versa.
What's the status on the cats? Apparently, the cats have a problem, or most seals have a problem with cats.
Right. So that's with the toxoplasmosis. So I was mentioning earlier, with the disease that the cats carry, where it's actually in the cat's feces. They shed their eggs in the cat's feces, and that gets into the water system and gets ingested by the seals. It can cause any number of problems, a lot of immunodeficiency problems. So as far as the status go, it's something that we're heavily looking into and trying to plan. But I don't think there have been any really steps taken forward officially yet. And then also, like the turtles, using seal-friendly fishing techniques. So again, the barbless circle hooks, not just for turtles, for seals as well. And if you are a fisherman and you're out, you see a seal in the area where you're fishing, just go take a break for a little bit. The seals, they don't always stick around in the same spot, especially if they're out foraging. If you see them out there, just take a break, maybe go to another fishing spot that's out of the area of the seal for you to go as well. All right, any questions on monk seals before I move on? I know they're a lot of people's favorites. No, okay, all right, so over to one of my favorites, the humpback whale, the kohola. So humpback whale, the scientific name is Megaptera novae anglii, which actually means giant winged New Englander. If you guys have ever seen a whale breach, you can certainly understand that because they are up there in New England and there's giant wings. They have the largest pectoral fins of any whale. And they're protected under the MMPA, and they're classified for now as depleted. So I'm sure you guys probably know quite a bit about humpback whales. They're heavily, there's a lot of education surrounding them with the sanctuary we have here. But they do migrate from Alaska. So their feeding grounds are up north in Alaska, and they migrate down south during the winter in Hawaii to breed. And down here in Hawaii, it's actually the most concentrated breeding area in the world. It's 10 to 12,000 individuals, they project. Could even be more. We're not really sure. The last really accurate population estimate was over 10 years ago. So we know that population was likely been increasing, so it could even be more than that. And they feed mostly on krill. So an interesting about these humpback whales is when they're down here in Hawaii, they're actually not really eating. and that's because we don't have krill and other critters they might eat. Some feel they might eat opportunistically, but for the most part, compared to what they eat up in Alaska, it's very little, if any, that they eat down here. So they lose quite a bit of body weight while they're down here doing the reproductive activities. And a lot of times you'll see our young calves in the Hawaiian waters. So Alaska tries to claim the humpback whales as theirs, but they're born here. They're Kama'aina, so they're definitely Hawaiian.
I have a question on the map. Can
Uh-huh.
you go back for 1 second?
Sure.
Are those separate groups that it looks like they all winter up by between Alaska and Russia and Aleutian Islands, but then some go to the east to Japan and some come south to Hawaii. Are
Mhm.
those two separate groups, or do they interchange? And 1 year the one from Hawaii will go to Japan?
That is an excellent question. And I'm going to go to my next slide
Okay.
because we're going to talk about how these animals are split up. No, that was great. It's a great leeway. So to answer your question, they are distinct populations. Whales typically will go to the same breeding grounds every year. And actually recently there was an action out of our office where they revised the listing status of the humpback whale. So they split the global species into 14 distinct population segments, or DPSs, which is kind of what you're referring to. Yep. Depending on their breeding ground. So there are a lot of feeding grounds where they do intermingle, but there are very specific breeding grounds that individuals go to. And they're able to split them up globally by these breeding grounds. So when they split them up, they basically need to relook at each DP, whether or not they warrant a listing under the ESA. So what they found is that 4 of the DPSs stayed as endangered. So the Central America DPS, the Western North Pacific DPS, the Cape Verde, Northwest Africa DPS, and the Arabian Sea. And then 1 DPS was listed as threatened, which was the Mexico DPS. But 9 of the DPSs, just because the species has recovered so well in these populations, did not warrant a listing. And that includes the Hawaii DPS. So that's why the humpback whales here in Hawaii are no longer listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act, because they've recovered so well.
Or are they just off
Nope.
altogether?
Yeah, so they're unlisted. Yeah, they're unlisted.
What countries are eating them? Humpback.
So that I know of, and I'm not privy to what it is recently, but I know that there are some whaling actions in Japan, Norway, and Iceland, possibly Russia. And that's just the recent evidence that I've had. There's an environmental assessment that was written recently, and that's the information that came out of that. Not sure if that's fact or speculation, but pretty sure that there's still some whaling actions going on. So humpbacks do have a fair number of threats. So human disturbance, you guys are seeing a trend here. Ship strikes is a big one because they are such large animals, and they are so concentrated too, especially in the Maui Nui waters. They are susceptible to ship strikes. Coastal development, again, you're seeing some trends here with these animals. So habitat quality decreasing. Commercial whaling, not so much in this country. So biotoxins, again, not very much in Hawaii, but in their feeding grounds, it's possible. You have more of the harmful algal blooms up there. Disease, virus, which is similar to the measles virus, which is common in dolphins and whales. Entanglements is a very big one. We see a lot of entanglements down here. A lot of entanglements actually of gear up in Alaska we'll see down here. So gear that they'll actually drag down that whole way down into Hawaii. So anthropogenic noise as well from human activities, pollution, contaminants. So offshore drilling, again, not so much in Hawaiian waters, but in other waters in the Pacific. And predation, so more natural one. Orcas actually can attack the calves, the humpback whale calves. Again, not common here in Hawaii, but as they're migrating or up in Alaska in the northern Pacific, they may run into that. So as far as the viewing guidelines, so the humpbacks are a little unique where they actually have a regulation put into place. So again, the regulation is an extension of the law. So it's illegal under the MMPA for any vessel, person, or object to approach a humpback whale within 100 yards. So this includes approaching by interception, or some of you may know as leapfrogging, where if you put yourself or a vessel in the path of a humpback whale so that it approaches within 100 yards. So that's actually something that was reclarified on the new rule that was just published a few months ago. So that rule was published under the MMPA because the original rule was the Endangered Species Act. But since they got taken off the endangered species list, they re-implemented a new rule under the MMPA, which was very similar to the Endangered Species Act. So one of the difference being that they clarified that approach by interception, or this leapfrogging tactic, is a form of approach that is commonly done with people viewing whales from vessels. And another thing about this rule that a lot of people may not know is that all aircraft must remain 1,000 feet from humpback whales as well. So for vessel, person, or object, 100 yards, 1,000 feet. So another thing you don't want to do is you don't want to encircle or trap the humpbacks between boats or between boats and the shore as well. So you want to make sure that they have enough space, that they're able to escape if they need to, they're able to dive down. You don't want to trap them in because that does cause stress. So if you are approached by a whale, which is very common, you really want to be safe. So you want to put the engine in neutral and allow the animal to pass. You don't want to have those propellers running. That can cause a lot of damage if the whale hits it. You also don't want to be moving where you could possibly hit it with more of an impact. So if you're in a vessel, put it in neutral, enjoy the wonderful experience you're getting of the whale being close, and allow it to keep moving. And also too, if you're a captain, keep a sharp lookout. You want to make sure that you're up on deck, you're at the helm when you're in these waters during whale season. You're not going, into the galley, grab a beer or anything. You want to keep a sharp lookout. And if you see whales in the area, to warn other vessels as well. To get away, there's a pod of whales up ahead of you. I saw. Just be safe out there. All right. Questions on humpback whales before I move on?
I have one question.
Yes.
Just in general, you say that down close to Mexico is another feeding area?
Breeding area.
Breeding area,
Mhm.
right. And the gray whales are there. Is there interaction or
You know what? I'm not sure.
stress about sharing feeding area, breeding area?
You know what? I'm not sure if there's any interaction down there. I can imagine they do probably run into each other every once in a while, but as far as competition, yeah, they're probably not. I don't know. I wouldn't think they're interested in each other. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yes, sir. That's a good question. So that is an excellent question. So with humpbacks, we actually don't really need to tag them very often. So the tags that they get, they can be big, bulky, hard to put on, and expensive too, because they don't last very long and we lose them a lot. So a good way to tell humpbacks apart, maybe see if I can find a good picture. If you look at its fluke or its tail fin there, you see the white pattern that's there. That's actually unique to every individual whale. It's kind of like your fingerprints. So you know the fingerprints on your fingers, how no one has any fingerprints like yours in the world? Similar to the pattern on the back, on the underside of a humpback whale's fluke. So what they can do is they can actually take pictures of the humpback whales and put it into a catalog. And then, maybe a year or a couple of years later, they'll take another picture of that same whale and you can match it up. And that's the same whale. Good question. All right, so we're going to move on to the Hawaiian spinner dolphins, or the Naya. So the spinners are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So a lot of folks here don't know that there are actually 6 island-associated stocks. So stocks that are separate genetically. They found in genetic studies that they're actually separate. So you have a stock around Kauai and Ni'iau, which you have approximately 600 individuals. So Oahu and the 4 islands region around Maui there, the Maui Nui waters. And then a population around the Hawaii Island. And then also a few that are up in the monument, Curia Midway and Pearl and Hermes Reef, and a more pelagic one that stays more offshore. So there are these island associated stocks. So the population is actually much smaller than we thought, because we all thought it was one population together, but really genetically they're these separate populations, which makes them a little more vulnerable in a sense, because you don't have the individuals from the other populations coming in to repopulate if they have a problem, if their population numbers decrease. So these spinners, they eat quite a bit. So they eat a lot of fish, squid, and shrimp. So these little critters in the mesopelagic zone. And they eat about 1 to 4 prey items per minute for about 10 hours. So they eat quite a bit. And talk a little bit about the day in the life of a spinner dolphin. So they actually work the night shift, these guys. So at night, they'll go offshore to hunt in these large groups. And then during the day, when we typically see them, they're using these shallow bays to daytime behaviors. So resting, nurturing their young, socializing, and avoiding predators.
Do dolphins close their eyes, or do they have just a film over
They
their
have the film.
film, but no eyelid?
Mm-mm. No, and they have yes. Oh yeah.
60 years ago, I used to go to Lanai before the Manele Beach was, the Manele Hotel was built.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to swim with the dolphins. And it was fun. I mean, the dolphins just came and swam with us. And then also, we used to stand on the beach and look at the whales. And
Mhm.
we used to go to Lahaina,
Mm-hmm.
just to go Lahaina, and we pass the whales. That was wonderful.
It was, and you know, that's a good point too. And I was going to touch on this a little later, but since you mentioned that, I think historically, you know, people that lived here did have a lot of interactions with these islands. That it was common and an accepted thing to do, where things like, you know, getting close to the whales or swimming with the dolphins. And the issue that we're seeing now is that these interactions are happening more and more, where, you know, before, when it was a few people going out and swimming with the dolphins, now we have, you know, several boats and hundreds, even thousands of people a day going out and swimming with the dolphins. It's just this incessant human activity that's around them that's really affecting their health. And I'll get to that a little bit further. But that's a great point, because historically, I think, you know, before it was okay because it was just a few people doing it. You know, there weren't that many people on the island. And it was kind of more of an accepted thing. But, you know, unfortunately now, just because it's happening so much and it's just day after day after day. And again, I'll go over a little bit of the research we have, that it's really kind of turned into an issue. So real quick, I go over some of the threats that these spinners have. So again, human disturbance, you knew that one was coming up. Fishery interactions, again. So hookings, entanglements. You don't see as many with these guys, but still they do happen. Coastal development from reducing habitat quality. So infectious diseases, so the toxoplasmosis as well. They did find toxo in one of the spinner dolphins that stranded off Ko'olina not too long ago. Marine debris, noise, similar to the whales. So these guys are smaller animals, so they do have a fair amount of predators. They are one of the smaller dolphins in the world. So sharks, whales, like pilot whales, even bottlenose dolphins. I don't think they eat them, but they certainly mess with them and like to bully them around quite a bit. So aggressive marine mammal interactions as well is a threat to them. And sort of following up on my point I was making before, that these spinner dolphins really are facing intense viewing pressures by people. So because their rest behavior is so predictable that you know they're going to a certain bay every day, you know they're going to be there just about every day, it makes them easily accessible for wildlife tour operators and just people swimming out from shore as well. So they face these intense pressures during their critical daytime resting period. So again, you know, they're doing these essential behaviors. They're resting, they're nurturing their young, they're socializing, these important things. They're getting these viewing pressure while they're doing these important behaviors. And also too, you know, advertising on social media just really encourages close encounters with these animals. And you go online and check a lot of these Instagram accounts, and there's pictures of people swimming with the dolphins and, getting really close. And they're amazing pictures. They're beautiful and showing these animals, but all that's doing is encouraging other people to go out and do the same. More people, it really does snowball. And there are quite a bit of studies out there. The Big Island in particular, there's a lot of research done on these viewing pressures. And they found that in some of the important resting bays out there on the Big Island, that these dolphins are exposed to human activities 100 meters 83% of the time during the day. So 83% of the time while they're resting, socializing, and nurture their young, they have someone within 100 meters. And they only get about 10 minutes of reprieve between exposures. So only 10 minutes before someone else comes within 100 meters and interacts with them. And it's been increasing over the years. So if you look at 2006, and this kind of is the point I was trying to make, that 11 years ago, we only had about 10 throughout the whole state. And now we have about 70. So it's increased a lot in the last few years.
Can't that be limited under some of the regulations that are already in existence? I mean, can't there be number totals per day, or in particular areas, number totals for particular bays, or something to reduce that?
That is an excellent question, and I'll get to that in just a sec.
Okay.
You guys are good. You're really on it. So, I hope I've shown you that the viewing pressure has gotten greater over the years, and they are facing this intense pressure. But just because, one thing's happening doesn't mean it's causing anything. We have seen some impacts, that behavioral changes that these dolphins have been exhibiting. So, avoidance behaviors of both people and boats, deterrence from entering their preferred habitats. So maybe not going to a certain bay that they prefer. One of them possibly could be the bay over in Lanai, where I know that, and it's strictly anecdotal, that the dolphins aren't there as much anymore as they used to be. And they attribute a lot of that to human disturbance. So change in occupancy rates. So occupancy in the bays, shorter resting periods, changes in daily behavioral patterns like aerial behavior or direction of travel, and just an overall constant state of vigilance. And these are just spinner dolphins here in Hawaii. There's a lot of research that viewing pressure in general on dolphins has these effects and even greater effects, like just complete habitat avoidance, habitat abandonment, and even reduced fitness as well. So kind of going to your question a little bit, talking about, is there any way to enforce this to make this better? Well, harassment is illegal under the MMPA. It is illegal to harass the dolphins. And so under the current protections, any act that has potential to disturb a spinner dolphin or any marine mammal is prohibited under the MMPA without prior authorization from NOAA Fisheries. So this can include close approach by any means and activities such as swimming with the dolphins. So because of this, because of the research that we've seen and the issues that the public has raised and discussion with our partners and our enforcement bodies, we decided that the current protections that are in place for the dolphins under the MMPA are not sufficient. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish what harassment is of spinner dolphins under the MMPA. So we're proposing a rule back in August, a rule to prohibit swimming with dolphins and approaching dolphins within 50 yards to reduce the human activities that can result in harassment. So really what this is doing is basically clarifying what harassment is, in a sense, making it more specific for the public to understand what harassment is, and hopefully clarify to them so they know how to act around them responsibly. So it takes usually about a year between the proposed and the final rule to come out with the final decision by the end of 2017. And again, we're not changing the law. We're just making it clear to the public. So some guidelines, and these are not just subject to spinner dolphins. So because there isn't a finalized put into place, this is for all dolphin and whales. So you want to remain at least 50 yards away from the dolphins and whales. You don't want to swim with the wild dolphins. So again, just like the whales, don't encircle or trap them between the shore or other boats. And if approached, just like the whales, just float in the water, let them pass by. And move away cautiously if the animals show signs of disturbance. So talking about signs of disturbance, even if you go out there, you follow these guidelines, sometimes the animals can still be disturbed. So you really want to keep an eye out for these signs of disturbance. If you see any of them, cautiously move away if you can. So I can go ahead and let you read there. I think we're getting short on time, maybe a little bit. Okay. So I'll leave that up there for a sec, but a lot of them are very similar, basically just rapid movements, sudden awakening, vocalizations, escape tactics, things like that. So there's many ways you guys can help. So one, go out and practice and encourage responsible behavior around marine wildlife. I think that one's really simple. Now that you guys know and you understand, you can practice that when you're around the wildlife, and also educate others on viewing guidelines and importance of respecting wildlife. So if you're going out to get a tour, something like that, or maybe someone's coming to visit you here and they want to book a tour, responsible tour operators that minimize disturbance. So ones that refrain from harmful or illegal activities, ones that use marketing techniques that don't create irreasonable expectations for customers, and provide an educational experience that's safe for the dolphins. And we have actually a program that we partner with called Dolphin Smart. It's actually a voluntary program that companies will be recognized. They follow a certain set of criteria in order to minimize their disturbance of the dolphins while they're out there. So it's a great one to follow if you guys are booking a tour. So in summary, marine wildlife here in Hawaii aren't facing intense viewing pressures. We have an increase in tourism, increase in resident population, so interactions are likely to increase as well. So we have wildlife conservation laws and regulations guidelines put into place to really inform the public and help them on what the responsible behaviors are around these animals, and the legal behaviors as well. So I like to end with this one. I think it's really important for people to kind of understand that real animal lovers respect the animals. They really do. And I know that, there's a growing sentiment that people feel, the pressures from social media to get these close, pictures. They feel that animals are there for our entertainment. That's really not the case. They're really not. So if you really do love these animals, don't love them to death. Respect them. So give them space, minimize disturbance, keep them wild. So just throw this slide up real quick. So you can see we don't do it by ourselves. We have a ton of partners that we work with. All do a great job. All really care about these animals as well. And I'll just do one final one. It's like 15 seconds long. Is that okay?
Please keep your distance and respect our marine wildlife.